When a group of reckless bikers pick on a quiet, overweight farmer, they have no idea they've just challenged a retired Delta Force commander ready to defend his peace and his life. Earl Jennings woke up before the sun, just like he did every Saturday morning. The rooster hadn't even started crowing yet, but he was already moving around in his old farmhouse, getting ready for the day. The house was quiet, still smelling faintly of wood smoke and coffee from the night before. His boots made soft thuds on the worn wooden floor as he walked into the kitchen. He turned on the coffee machine, scratched his thick gray beard, and stared out the window. The fields behind his house were bathed in blue morning light. Rows of corn and vegetables stretched far and wide, calm and peaceful. His chickens clucked quietly in their coop, waiting for him. Earl looked nothing like the heroes you see in movies. He was overweight, slow-moving, and always wore faded denim overalls. His belly hung over his belt, and he walked with a bit of a limp. "I'm a V." Kids in town called him Big Earl behind his back, thinking he didn't hear. But he did, he just never reacted. The truth was, he didn't care much about names anymore. After everything he'd been through in his life, words didn't bother him. These days, he preferred quiet, peace, and the dirt under his fingernails. Once his coffee was ready, he sat down with a worn notepad and checked off his list. Eggs, the sweet corn, tomatoes, squash, and 2 crates of peaches. Everything was ready. He'd loaded the old pickup the night before. All that was left was to collect a few more cartons of fresh eggs, then head to the farmer's market in town. Earl had been selling his produce at the local market for almost 8 years. Most people in town knew him, but not many really knew. To them, he was just a simple farmer who kept to himself. He wasn't very talkative and rarely joined in on gossip. He'd show up, set up his stall, sell his goods, and go home. He didn't tell stories about his past, didn't flash pictures of medals, and didn't talk about war. Only a few old friendsmen with firm handshakes and a certain look in their eyes knew what Earl used to be. Years ago, Earl had served in one of the most elite military units in the world, Delta Force. He had seen things that would give most people nightmares. He had led missions in places the news never reported. He had faced enemies who didn't wear uniforms, survived ambushes, and rescued hostages from terrorist camps deep in enemy territory. But all of that felt like another life now. That Earl was going to work. At least that's what he hoped. After a hot shower and a quick breakfast of grits and eggs, Earl grabbed his straw hat and headed out. His truck rattled as it rolled down the gravel road, a cloud of dust trailing behind it. He waved to his neighbor, an elderly woman watering her flowers, and she waved back with a smile. Everyone liked Earl. He was the kind of man who helped fix fences without being asked, who dropped off extra vegetables on porches, and who once stayed up all night helping a family whose barn had caught fire. But no one ever asked about the scar on his arm or the way he scanned every room he walked into. No one asked why fireworks made him flinch, or why he always sat with his back to a wall at the diner. When he reached the market, the sun had just begun to warm the pavement. The place was already buzzing with activity. Farmers unloaded boxes, craftspeople arranged handmade goods, and kids ran between stalls, laughing and waving. Earl backed into his usual spot under the big oak tree near the edge of the market. He liked it there, less crowded, more shade. He took his time setting up his table, placing the produce neatly and stacking the eggs carefully. He arranged the peaches in small baskets, their golden red skin catching the sunlight. As people started arriving, Earl greeted them with nods and polite smiles. He never talked much, but his regular customers knew he was reliable. His vegetables were always fresh, his prices fair, and he never cheated anyone. Old Mrs. Wilson came by first, buying her usual dozen eggs and a bundle of green beans. Then came a young mother with her 2 kids, who loved Earl's juicy peaches. He gave the kids a couple of extra ones and a wink, and they giggled and ran. Everything about the morning felt calm, almost a calm. Around mid-morning, while Earl was helping a fellow vendor carry a box of preserves to her stall, he noticed a loud rumble in the distance. A few heads turned. The sound grew louder until a group of motorcycles came into view. Big bikes, shiny chrome, loud engines. There were 6 of them, all ridden by big men wearing black leather vests with skulls and flames stitched on the back. They weren't from around there, any local could tell. Their bikes were covered in dust and mud from the road, and their presence immediately changed the air in the market. The bikers parked right in the middle of the walking path. A few stalls, they didn't care. They got off their bikes, stretched, and started wandering through the market like they owned the place. A few vendors looked nervous. Others whispered quietly, hoping the group would just pass through. Earl watched from a distance, saying nothing. He recognized the type: loud, aggressive, needing to feel powerful. He'd seen many like them in his old life. At first, the bikers just walked around making rude jokes and laughing too loudly. But it wasn't long before their behavior turned worse. They knocked over a stand selling handmade soaps. One of them grabbed a flower crown from a little girl and laughed when she cried. A couple of townsfolk tried to politely ask them to calm down, but the bikers only got more obnoxious. People began to keep their distance. Earl quietly returned to his stall, pretending not to notice. Then it happened. One of the bikers' stall, bald with a dragon tattoo on his neck, walked over to Earl's stall. He stared at the peaches, picked one up, took a bite, and spit it on the ground. Overpriced garbage, he sneered. You sellin' these to make rent, fat boy? Earl didn't respond, just looked at the man with calm eyes and slowly reached to straighten the basket the biker had knocked over. Another biker joined in, laughing. Hey, maybe he eats more than he sells. He joked, poking Earl's belly. You sure this guy's a farmer? Looks more like the whole barn. They laughed loudly. A small crowd had started to gather nearby, some holding phones, recording the scene, others frozen with fear. One of the bikers pushed Earl's table, sending tomatoes rolling onto the ground. Still, Earl said nothing. The bald biker stepped closer. What cat got your tongue? You deaf or just stupid? Shoved Earl's shoulder hard enough to make him stumble back a few steps. People gasped. A woman across the way called out, "Leave him alone!" But the biker ignored her. Earl straightened his hat, took a deep breath, and gently picked up a fallen basket. He didn't look angry. He didn't shout or push back. But behind his eyes, something shifted. A storm was quietly building. Years of discipline held it back for now. The leader of the group stepped forward. He was the biggest of them all, with greasy hair, rings on every finger, and a cruel grin. Maybe we need to teach the farmer some manners, he said, cracking his knuckles. The other bikers cheered him on, forming a loose circle around Earl's stall. The crowd held its breath. Some people stepped back. A child cried. Others whispered, "Someone call the police." But the police were 20 minutes away, and everyone knew it. Earl slowly looked up at the leader. His face was calm, but his eyes had turned cold like steel pulled from ice. He said just one thing, so softly that only those closest could hear. "Made a mistake." The bikers laughed again, thinking it was some kind of joke. But it wasn't. Far from it, and though no one in that market could have guessed it. The quiet, overweight farmer standing before them was about to show everyone exactly who he really was. The crowd stood frozen. A few people held their breath. Some were whispering to each other, unsure of what to do. The air around the farmer's market had turned thick, like it was holding something heavy. The birds had stopped chirping, and even the breeze seemed to pause. The biggest biker, the one with greasy hair and tattoos crawling up both arms, stepped even closer to Earl, His voice was low, but threatening, the kind of voice meant to scare people. "You think you're a tough old man?" he growled. "You want to say that again?" Earl didn't blink. His voice stayed calm. "You've made a mistake," he repeated, this time a little louder. The biker sneered and looked back at his gang. "You hear that? Farmer thinks he's some kind of hero." The others laughed, all except one younger biker who looked uneasy. He wasn't laughing anymore. Something about Earl's stillness bothered him. Wasn't flinching, wasn't nervous, wasn't scared, just stood there quiet, calm, and focused. The younger man had seen that look once before on a Marine uncle who barely spoke after coming home from war, but the rest of the gang didn't see it. They were too caught up in their pride and foolishness. "Let's smash his little table and move on," the tattooed one said. He raised a boot and kicked the edge of Earl's produce stand. The table wobbled but held. A crate of peaches tumbled to the ground. Earl took a step forward. It was slow, almost gentle. But there was something different in the way he moved, like a big animal that didn't want to fight, but knew how. The crowd didn't know what to expect. Some people pulled out their phones again. Others tried to get vendors to step in. Everyone was afraid. These bikers were loud, strong, and there were 6 of them. Earl was just one old fat farmer, at least. So that's what they thought. The leader of the gang walked right up to Earl, chest puffed out, trying to tower over him. "What you gonna do, huh? Throw a tomato at me?" he said, laughing. Earl didn't answer. He just looked at the man's hands, his feet, his stance. He noticed the way the man leaned his weight on the right leg. The ring on his middle finger could be used like brass knuckles. The man had no training, just size and attitude. The biker shoved Earl hard. Earl stumbled back a step but didn't fall. He looked at the man for one final moment, as if offering him one last chance to walk away. The chance was not taken. The biker raised his hand to swing. That's when it happened. Before anyone could even process what they were seeing, Earl moved. Fast, like in the movies, not flashy. Efficient. Every step, every motion had purpose. He ducked under the swing, grabbed the biker's wrist with one hand, and twisted it backward. The man let out a loud shout of pain as Earl used his other hand to slam his elbow into the biker's ribs. It was so quick, so smooth, that some people didn't even realize what happened until the biker was on the ground, face down, groaning. The crowd gasped. The second biker rushed forward. He was heavier, stronger looking, and came charging like a bull.
Ow.
Earl stepped sideways, grabbed the man's arm as he passed, and used his own weight against him. He threw the biker off balance and tripped him onto the gravel. The man landed hard and didn't get up right away. Now the market was no longer quiet. People were shouting, scattering. Some children cried, others stared wide. A few older folks near the back began to clap softly, unable to believe what they were witnessing. The third biker came at Earl with a chain he had pulled from his belt. He swung it wildly. Earl ducked the first swing and stepped in close, too close for the chain to matter. With a short, precise move, Earl struck the man's knee from the side with his boot. The biker collapsed, yelping in pain. Earl grabbed the chain and threw it away into a nearby bush. Now, 3 were down. The 4th and 5th hesitated. They looked at each other, unsure. They had thought this would be easy. Just a few laughs at a fat old farmer. They hadn't expected to see one of their toughest guys lying on the ground, gasping for air, or another screaming about his leg. "Who the hell is this guy?" one of them muttered. Earl didn't answer, just stood still again, breathing steadily, his arms loose at his sides, like he was ready for more, but hoping he didn't have to be. The younger biker, the 6th one, didn't move at all. He had already figured it out, something in the way the old man fought. It was too good, too precise, no wasted movement. No show, just action. "This ain't right," he said quietly to the others. "This guy's military, maybe special forces. We messed with the wrong dude." But the 4th biker didn't listen. Out of pride or foolishness, he came forward with his fists up. Earl didn't flinch. He waited. The man swung wildly, and Earl caught the punch with both hands, twisted the wrist, and dropped him with a foot sweep. The man landed on his back, gasping now. Only one stood. The fifth biker looked around. Seeing all his friends groaning on the ground, he slowly backed away, hands raised. "We didn't mean nothin'," he stammered. "Just a joke, man. Earl didn't chase him, just nodded once." "Then leave," he said quietly. The fifth man helped the others get up. Some limped. Some clutched their arms or sides. None of them said another word. They backed toward their motorcycles. A few people in the crowd booed, others clapped. A woman filmed the whole thing on her phone, whispering, "Oh my God, he took all of them down." As the gang rode away, their engines roared again. But this time, it wasn't a proud roar. Sounded like retreat. When the noise faded, all eyes turned to Earl. He stood there, brushing dirt off his shirt, straightening his table, and quietly picking up the fallen peaches. He said nothing. His hands were steady. His breath was calm. A man walked over, stunned. "Sir, where did you learn to do that?" Earl didn't look up. "Long time ago," he said simply. Another woman approached. "You okay?" That was amazing. Earl gave her a gentle smile. "Just don't like bullies." A few people began to applaud. Others started to cheer softly. Some ran over to shake his hand, to thank him. Kids looked at him like a superhero. But Earl didn't want attention. He waved it off kindly. "I'm no hero," he said, "just a farmer." But people didn't believe that anymore. As the day went on, customers kept coming to his stall more than ever before. Some bought produce just to support him. Others wanted to talk to him, shake his hand, take a picture. He politely refused. Most pictures, saying he wasn't looking for fame, all he wanted was peace. By late afternoon, the market was closing. Earl packed up his crates slowly. He didn't rush. A few vendors came over to thank him, calling him brave. A young boy handed him a drawing of a farmer standing tall with a cape, and Earl smiled. Touched on the way to his truck, he paused and looked back at the empty space where the bikers had stood. He hadn't wanted any of this. Didn't want fights, or fame, or fear. All he wanted was a quiet life. But sometimes, when trouble comes to your door, you don't have the luxury to ignore it. He knew the code. Protect the innocent. Stand up when others won't. And never use more force than needed. As he drove away from the market, the sun setting behind the trees, Earl Jennings, known now not just as Big Earl, but something more, hoped the peace would last, but deep down, he knew one thing for certain: the past never really goes away. Sometimes it comes back when you least expect it. But he would be ready, always ready. The video of Earl Jennings taking down 6 bikers in a quiet farmer's market spread like wildfire. At first, it was just a short clip posted by a teenager. Then another angle surfaced, and then another. Within hours, it was shared on social media platforms, news blogs, and veteran forums. The title that caught everyone's attention read, "Fat Farmer Floors Biker Gang in Seconds." But people soon realized this wasn't just about a fat farmer. This was something different, something serious. By the next morning, reporters were calling the small town where Earl lived. Local news stations sent vans. Curious people from nearby towns began showing up at the market, not to buy produce, but to see the man who had become a mystery. Most of the locals were still in shock. They had always seen Earl as a kind man who helped fix gates, carried heavy boxes, and gave away extra eggs for free. Nobody had ever imagined that the quiet farmer with the slow walk was capable of taking down an entire gang without even raising his voice. But Earl wasn't interested in attention. He spent the day after the incident the same way he spent most: days feeding chickens, watering his crops, and walking through rows of corn in the morning fog. He didn't watch the news or check the internet. His old flip phone barely even worked properly. He only found out about the online buzz when his neighbor's teenage grandson showed him a video. "You're famous, Mr. Jennings," the boy said excitedly. "You're all over the internet." Earl looked at the phone screen and saw his own image had on calm expression, standing in the market while people screamed and bikers lay on the ground. He said nothing for a long moment, then handed the phone back and went back to picking cucumbers. It wasn't that Earl was embarrassed. It was something deeper. For many years he had worked hard to leave the old life behind. The life of missions, danger, and split-second decisions. He had given everything to that world, his youth, his body, even parts of his soul. But eventually, he realized he couldn't keep living in war forever. He wanted peace. He wanted dirt. Under his nails, not blood on his hands. That's why he had retired and moved to this quiet town. No one here asked about his past. No one pried. That's the way he liked it. But the peace was cracking now. Within 2 days, his name was trending. Online, former military men started recognizing the techniques Earl used in the video: pressure points, grapples, disarming methods. Some said he had to be ex-special forces. Few claimed to have served with him. One even posted an old photo showing a much younger, leaner Earl in a military uniform standing in front of a helicopter in a desert. Then things got serious. A local reporter visited Earl's farm. She was polite and respectful, not like the others who came pushing microphones in his face. She brought a pie from her grandmother's recipe and asked to sit for a chat. Earl, not wanting to be rude, agreed. They sat on the porch, drinking sweet tea while chickens pecked around in the grass nearby. She didn't ask directly at first. She talked about the market, his vegetables, and the seasons. Then, gently, she asked, "Are you really a former Delta Force commander?" Earl looked at her, quiet for a long time. His eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in thought. Finally, he said, "I served my country. I did what needed to be done, that's all." She didn't press further. She nodded respectfully. "People are inspired by you, Mr. Jennings. You showed courage when no one else stepped up." Earl shook his head. "I didn't want to fight. I never do. But when good people stand by and do nothing, bad men take over. I've seen it too many times." She didn't publish that quote, but the story she wrote was still powerful. It painted a picture of a man with a past few could imagine, who had chosen peace but still remembered how to fight when necessary. The story spread even further. A national news channel picked it up. Then military podcasts began discussing URL's possible identity. Some remembered his name from whispers, from old operations that were never officially recorded. A former Green Beret even spoke on a show, saying, "If that's who I think it is, and those bikers are lucky they walked away." While all this was happening, the biker gang wasn't taking things quietly either. The gang, known locally as the Steel Vultures, had a rough reputation. They weren't a big national group, but they had ties to some dangerous circles: meth dealers, stolen parts, bar fights, and intimidation. They usually rode into small towns to make trouble, knowing the police wouldn't mess with them. But now they were humiliated. Videos of them being taken down by an old farmer were all over the internet. People were laughing. Other gangs were mocking them. Their pride was shattered. The leader, whose name was Mason Brick Rollins, was furious. He had 3 broken ribs and a bruised ego. He swore revenge. He didn't care if Earl was ex-military or not. He wanted to prove he wasn't a joke. The other gang members were more cautious. One of them even suggested letting it go, saying, "Man, that guy ain't normal. He's trained," he warned us. But Brick wouldn't listen. "We're not going to let some pig farmer make fools out of us," he growled. "I'm going to make him beg." The gang started planning. They asked around. They gathered what little info they could about Earl: where he lived, who his neighbors were, how far the sheriff's station was. They wanted to scare him, rough him up, maybe burn his crops. Nothing too public, but enough to send a message. Earl, meanwhile, was already preparing. He wasn't paranoid, but he wasn't stupid either. He knew how men like Brick thought. He'd seen their kind all over the world: loud when they felt powerful, dangerous when they felt weak. And now, Brick was both embarrassed and angry. That made him a threat, so Earl quietly took a few steps. He reinforced the locks on his doors. He moved a few security cameras around the property. He contacted a couple of old friends, not to ask for help, but to give them a heads up. And then, late one night, the past knocked on his DoorDash. Literally. It was almost midnight when headlights appeared at the edge of Urel's long driveway. The dogs barked once, then fell quiet. Earl stood up from his chair in the living room and turned off the lamp. He moved silently like a shadow. Old instincts returned without effort. He picked up a flashlight, but not the kind sold in stores. This one had a tactical grip and a blinding beam.
Oh.
In his pocket was something else. Not a weapon, but a small panic button that sent a signal to two retired friends nearby. Just in case. He watched the truck from the window. 4 figures got out. Couldn't see faces, but the way they moved told him enough. Big, clumsy, full of false confidence. They crept toward his porch, whispering and laughing under their breath. One of them knocked 3 sharp raps. Earl said nothing. Then came a voice. "Come on out, farmer. We just want to talk." Earl flipped on the porch light. The men squinted. Earl opened the door and stepped out, flashlight in hand, but kept it pointed at the ground. "You should leave," he said quietly. The men laughed. "Not so tough without your tomatoes and your audience, huh?" one said. Another one took a step forward, but that was a mistake. Earl clicked the flashlight to full power and aimed it straight at the man's eyes. The light was so bright it blinded him instantly. In the next second, Earl took 2 fast steps, grabbed the man's arm, twisted it, and pushed him against the porch post. "Next one steps forward," Earl said in a deadly calm voice. "Doesn't walk back." The others froze. Then they saw something that made their blood run cold. It wasn't the move. It wasn't the light. It was Earl's eyes. They weren't angry. They weren't scared. They were still, like the eyes of a man who had seen death and wasn't afraid of it. Brick stood at the back, holding a crowbar. He hesitated. The plan was falling apart. "You're just one old man," he barked, but there was less power in his voice now. Earl didn't blink. "And you're just 4 boys pretending to be wolves." One of the men broke first. He backed away. Another followed. Brick cursed and threw the crowbar on the ground. "This ain't over." He spat. "Double quotes, yes it is," Earl said. "Walk away while you still can." They did. Earl stood on the porch until the truck disappeared down the road. Then he went back inside, sat down and poured himself a glass of water. His hands were still steady. He didn't want to fight. But if the world tried to drag him back into it, he would face it the only way he knew how, with strength, control, and the quiet power of a man who had already survived the worst. After the confrontation at his porch, Earl Jennings felt a deep calm settle over him. The excitement of the market and the threat of the biker gang had stirred something inside, but Earl was no stranger to tension. He had faced danger many times before, but never like this in a quiet town, where all he wanted was to live simply. His mind was clear now, focused. He knew the bikers wouldn't give up easily. He had pride, anger, and a thirst for revenge. The question was, how far would they go? In the days that followed, Earl kept a close watch on his farm. He walked the fields early each morning and late each evening, his eyes scanning every shadow, every rustling leaf. The neighbors noticed his more cautious pace. Some asked if he was okay, but Earl just smiled and told them everything was fine. He didn't want to cause worry or draw more attention. But deep down, he knew the danger was real. The bikers, the steel vultures, were quietly gathering strength. They had retreated, but the bruises on their bodies burned like badges of shame. Brick, the gang leader, was furious. He met with his crew in a rundown garage outside town, surrounded by the smell of gasoline and old tires. His face was hard, scarred from years of fights, but his eyes burned with rage. "We ain't gonna let that farmer humiliate us again," Brick snarled, pacing back and forth. "We hit his farm, take his things, make him wish he never opened his mouth." One of the younger gang members, trying to sound brave, said, "What if he fights back again? That guy's no joke." Brick stopped and stared at him. "I don't care. We gotta break him. It's the only way we keep respect." Meanwhile, Earl's quiet farm life was changing. He had long known that peace was a fragile thing, like a thin glass that could shatter with the slightest hit. Now, that glass was cracking. One afternoon, while Earl was repairing a fence along the edge of his property, he heard a distant rumble motorcycles. He didn't need to look to know who it was. The sound was sharp and angry. His heart didn't race. His hands didn't shake, but his senses sharpened. Quickly finished tying the last knot on the fence and walked back to the house. His dog, A big German shepherd named Max followed closely, alert and growling softly from the porch. Earl watched as 6 motorcycles rolled down the dirt road toward his farm. They stopped just outside the gate. The bikers dismounted, wearing dark leather jackets with the Steel Vultures emblem stitched on the back. Their faces were hard, full of determination. Brick stepped forward, holding a baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire. "This is for what you did to us," he shouted. "You don't get to make us look like fools." Earl didn't move right away. He kept his eyes steady on Brick. "I warned you to stay away." Brick laughed cruelly. "Warnings don't mean anything to men like us. We settle things our way." The bikers started walking toward the farmhouse. Earl called Max to heel and went inside. He wasn't afraid, but he was preparing. He opened a hidden cabinet and took out a small box. Inside was a collection of items, emergency medical supplies, a few survival tools, and a handgun. Earl didn't want to use it, but he kept it close just in case. As the bikers approached the porch, Earl stepped out again, calm and steady. Didn't shout or threaten. His voice was low but firm. "Leave now. I don't want to hurt anyone." Brick raised the bat. Too late for that. Suddenly the air was filled with tension. The bikers spread out, looking to intimidate and find. Any weakness? Earl took a slow breath, recalling every lesson he'd learned in his years with Delta Force. "Fight smart, stay calm, and use your environment." Max growled louder. Baring his teeth, Brick swung the bat at Earl's head. Earl ducked just in time and grabbed the bat mid-swing. Using his strength, he twisted the weapon from Brick's hands and slammed it down on the ground. The bat shattered, now unarmed. Brick growled and charged at Earl. Earl sidestepped and grabbed him by the collar, using Brick's momentum to throw him over the porch railing. Brick hit the ground hard and groaned. The other bikers rushed forward. Earl didn't hesitate. He moved with the quiet confidence of a man who had fought countless battles, grabbed one biker's arm, twisted it, and threw him into the fence. Another tried to punch him, but Earl blocked and countered with a sharp elbow to the ribs. The fight was fierce but quick. Earl's movements were precise, no wasted energy, no careless strikes. His years of training showed in every move. Max helped too, barking and nipping at the bikers, keeping them off balance. One by one, the bikers fell or fled. Brick tried to get up, but Earl stood over him, breathing hard but steady. "This ends now," Earl said firmly. Brick looked up, eyes full of pain and humiliation. "You're dead meat, old man." Earl didn't answer. Instead, he picked up his phone and called the sheriff when the police arrived. The bikers were scattered, some hiding in the woods, others nursing bruises. The sheriff listened carefully to Earl's story and promised to keep an eye on the situation. After the police left, Earl sat on his porch, exhausted but calm. He looked out over his farm, the rows of corn, the dusty dirt roads, the small barn where he kept his tools. This was his sanctuary. The attack had been a reminder. No matter how much he wanted peace, sometimes the world didn't allow it. Earl was ready. Over the next few days, the town's attitude toward Earl shifted again. He was no longer just the friendly farmer. He was now seen as a protector. People came by with food, offers to help repair the fence, and words of thanks. A local mechanic even offered to install better security cameras around the farm. Earl appreciated the kindness but stayed humble. He reminded everyone that he didn't want trouble. He just wanted to live his life with dignity. Meanwhile, the biker gang was in trouble. The sheriff increased patrols around the town. Brick and his crew were under pressure. Some members started, leaving the gang scared of more fights and legal trouble. Despite everything, Earl didn't want violence to spread. He started talking to the community leaders about ways to improve safety and reduce crime. He believed that real strength wasn't just fighting, it was coming together. Slowly, the town began to change. People looked out for each other more. The market became a place of laughter and friendship again. Kids played without fear, and Earl, he returned to his crops, to the simple work of growing food and living quietly. But Earl knew deep down that the past never fully disappears. There were shadows that followed him, memories that wouldn't fade, and there would always be moments when he'd have to stand up again, because protecting what you love sometimes means stepping into the fight, even when you don't want to. After the last fight at his farm and the police involvement, Earl Jennings felt a mixture of relief and unease. The biker gang, the Steel Vultures, had been beaten and scared off for now. But Earl knew this was just one chapter of a longer story. He had lived many years in danger, but this kind of threat in his peaceful town made him realize how much his life had changed, and how much it hadn't. The town had changed too. People who once only nodded politely now stopped Earl on the street to shake his hand or ask if he needed anything. The market was full again, with families, vendors, and curious visitors who had heard about the farmer who could fight like a soldier. Some people called him a hero. Others simply saw a man who stood his ground when others would have run. Earl didn't seek any praise. He wanted his old life far behind him. But he also understood that sometimes standing up meant being seen. The quiet man everyone thought they knew was not just a farmer. He was someone who had protected others his entire life. He wasn't going to stop days after the fight. Earl received a surprising visit. It was a woman in her late 30s, dressed casually but with a confident air. She introduced herself as Sarah Mills, a journalist for a well-known magazine that focused on stories about veterans. She wanted to tell Earl's full story, not just the fight at the market or his run-in with the bikers, but his entire life from soldier to farmer. Earl was hesitant at first. He didn't like talking about the past. Memories of missions, battles, and losses were heavy. But Sarah was patient, and her questions gentle. Over several afternoons, she sat on Earl's porch and listened as he spoke quietly about his years. In the military, he talked about the training that pushed him to the edge of his limits, the friends he lost in faraway deserts and jungles, the missions that changed him forever. How after years of fighting, he realized that true strength wasn't just about skill or power. It was about choosing when to fight and when to find peace. Sarah was deeply moved. She told Earl that his story could inspire many, especially veterans struggling to adjust to life after service. Earl agreed, but on one condition. He wanted to keep the focus on peace, on the importance of community, and the power of standing up for what is right. The article came out a few weeks later. It was titled, "The Farmer Who Fought a Gang and Found Peace." It painted a full picture of Earl Jennings, not just a tough man, but a gentle soul who had seen the worst and still believed in kindness. The response was incredible. Messages poured in from all over the country. Veterans thanked Earl for his honesty. People from other small towns shared their own stories of standing up against bullies and criminals. Some even offered help or invited Earl to speak at community events. Earl was overwhelmed, but also hopeful. Maybe his past wasn't something to hide anymore. Maybe it could help others find their own strength. Meanwhile, life on the farm slowly returned to normal. Earl worked his land, cared for his animals, and enjoyed the quiet mornings that meant so much to him. Max, his loyal dog, was always by his side, alert but calm, but peace, Earl knew, was never guaranteed. One evening, while watching the sunset paint the sky with orange and pink, Earl reflected on everything that had happened. The bikers had disappeared, but threats like them never vanished completely. Evil could return in many forms, loud or quiet, fast or slow. It was up to people like him to be ready. He also thought about the community, how fear and silence could allow bad things to grow. But courage and togetherness could protect and heal. Earl began working quietly with the town's leaders. He helped organize neighborhood watch groups and spoke about safety and respect. He wanted everyone to feel they had the power to defend their homes without violence. The lesson he shared was simple but powerful. Strength was not just fighting it. Was caring enough to stand up for others? The town responded with enthusiasm. People who had been afraid to speak began joining meetings. They started working together to keep their streets safe. The market became more than a place to sell vegetables. It was a symbol of the town's unity. One afternoon, Earl received a letter from the local sheriff. It was a thank you note, praising Earl for his bravery and leadership. The sheriff wrote, that the biker gang had finally broken up, with some members arrested and others leaving town. Peace was returning, thanks in part to Earl's quiet courage. Earl smiled, feeling a deep satisfaction. It wasn't about glory or recognition, it was about making a difference. Despite all that, Earl remained humble. He still called himself a farmer first, a protector second. And he still cherished the simple joys watching the corn grow, feeling the earth beneath his fingers, listening to Max's happy barks. One morning, as Earl walked through his fields, he noticed a group of children playing nearby. They waved at him, calling him the hero farmer. He laughed softly and waved back. He knew they saw only a small part of who he was, but maybe that was enough. Maybe being a hero meant being there for others steady, strong, and kind. And Earl Jennings was ready to be just that, for as long as his days on the farm lasted.